So in the main part of the episode, we're talking about the September 1st, 2022 speech delivered by Biden, in which if you didn't watch it, I don't blame you. Fortunately for you, David and I risked severe mental illness and potential brain cancer.
I blacked out.
Shouts out to Brain Cancer doing us a favor with John McCain. But we risked that.
Oh, there's a groaner. There's a groaner right there.
We risked that to watch Biden for you so that we could, give you the Cliff Notes version and basically read between the lines. But not encouraging to watch the whole thing. If you just want to look at some pictures or just some brief snippets of it.
Or just a picture.
Tell me about
Picture's
the
fine.
optics of that whole thing.
Picture's fine.
It's fucking horrendous. Actually, as a matter of fact, picture right here.
Touch it, Dane. Touch the picture.
That looks pretty bad, right?
Touch the picture.
I don't want to. It's gross. It'll probably give me monkeypox.
Can we be thrown in a gulag for that?
Probably.
Okay. Shit.
So
I spit on a fake nothing picture. It wasn't even here when I spit.
So Biden spent I don't know, an inordinate amount of time doubling down on things he's said over the last couple of years, which we've covered on this podcast. Basically saying, he said earlier in the week, not in this speech, he said earlier in the week, he brought up his age-old AR-15s ain't going to get the job done against F-15s.
Again,
you got to have planes if you want to fight the government. That's what Joe says.
Again, I will say again. Again. Have you ever seen a street fight, Dane?
Yeah. Maybe not in person, but on video.
Yeah, you've seen. Yeah. So what's
World Star?
What's usually the thing that happens is that one of the two of them is like, yo, bro, you don't want this heat. On my mama, son.
Bunch of chest bumping, nothing gets done.
I'll push you in the ground, dog. Don't make me do this, dog. Like, that's literally what Joe, and all he's doing is egging on the competition. And then 8 times out of 10, the dude gets cracked on a jaw and goes to sleep. But the whole point is that that's antagonization. To say that you cannot stand up against us, we have F-15s. Well, technically, you're supposed to be our servant, are you not? You're employed by us. Right? Or have we forgotten about the Constitution? Like you keep blaming Trump for tearing up the Constitution. It seems like he wants to reclaim your guns. That was a part of the Constitution, was it not? They're limiting the words that we can say before they throw us into a jail. I thought the right to free speech was pretty fucking clear in the Constitution. I don't know where they like. As long as they call you it before they are found out to be it, it's like they get away with fucking murder. Like, you're the murderer, and then...
Yeah. Well, I mean, and so he spends most of the speech denouncing the, quote, what he calls the MAGA Republicans. And obviously we understand the association there.
Let's call it
anybody who supports or voted for Donald Trump. But really, I mean, what it is it's the very broad casting of the net of anybody who doesn't support him and his regime, right? He is establishment through and through. And like we talked about last week in the Sam Harris segment, the most insidious thing is not the fact that, the left will engage in political hackery against the right and vice versa. It's that this entrenched bureaucracy, this establishment regime who none of us voted for, right? The director of the CIA or the FBI or anybody in any of these other alphabet soup federal agencies, you and I did not vote for that person. So even if we were to concede the point that the United States is a democracy, it's not, it's a constitutional republic, but even if we conceded the point that Biden et al. Always are in a tizzy about protecting and saving democracy and the sacredness of our democracy and the MAGA Republicans are threats to democracy and blah, blah, blah. Even if we concede that point, that regime, who, no matter what administration comes and goes, Republicans or Democrats, the regime remains. And that regime lined up in lockstep, front to back, against Trump. And Biden is the exact opposite. He is a regime apparatchik from start to finish. So when he says MAGA Republicans, he's not just talking about people that fanatically, paint your caricature. They wrap themselves in the flag and they got their red hats on. That's not just who he's talking about. He's talking about 70 some odd million Americans that didn't vote for him, and the rest of us who didn't vote for him or Orange Man Bad, but don't like him because he's acting like a dictator, because he's acting like the exact type of person that he claims Donald Trump is. That's who he's going after. And what he's trying to do, and what we talked about during the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago, what he and the regime are trying to do by saying, be aware of terrorist acts. They are trying to provoke you. That imagery he used with the red backdrop and the Marines flanking him and very fascistic propaganda, Nazi kind of rallies type of imagery, that's not an accident, right? If nothing else, these people are shrewd political operators. Nothing is done on accident.
Purpose.
And they want to provoke you. They want you to do something, I'm not going to say stupid. They want you to do something crazy so that they can respond, so they can ratchet up the power.
And the thing is, we say it on this podcast all the time too. Might as well be are they stupid or are they dumb? Or evil, excuse me, segment. When you push the door, it always swings back twice as hard. Remember, Democrats, when you said Trump got elected because he was a Russian Manchurian candidate. Now, and you said that he was senile. You said he couldn't run the government. You said he wasn't incapable. He was incapable of running the government, that he only filled it with his family and friends, and they all made money off of him being in government. Cool. Now we have a guy that the Washington or New York Post literally came out and said, we buried the story of Hunter Biden's laptop that had ties to Russia, China, and subsequently Ukraine. He comes out and says what we all expected Trump to say, is that everybody that didn't vote for me is a communist Russian oligarch. Now he's coming out and he's saying everybody that didn't vote for me is a terrorist. But he's not doing it with words. He's doing it with action, a call to action. He says within this own statement, within his own speech, do you want to live in a world that's peaceful and prosperous? Or do you want to live in a world that's fear-mongering and based on control? Well, fuck me. That's where my head exploded. Because what is he doing with this whole speech? He's mongering fear, and he's trying to get more control over something he knows he doesn't have any control of. By the way, you've had complete control for 2 years. What have you done with it? When you suck at your job, the last lever that you can pull is to shit on the guy that's going to replace you. And they see him coming back, and they see him coming back hard. That's why they raided his place at Mar-a-Lago. They want to federally indict him so he can't actually run. They doth protest too loudly. They know they're fucking up. They know they're on their last heel, like CNN firing. Who is the guy that we threw the party for at the beginning of this episode?
Brian Fizzywater.
Brian Stelter?
Yeah, that guy.
Good. With reliable resources, right?
Yeah, unreliable sources, yeah.
Right, okay. That's it. So, again, like, the speech today is on your side tomorrow. It's like, I don't know. Which side is trying to limit your speech? Which side is trying to tell you how you need to feel? Which side is trying to tell you the way that you should go to be a good person?
Well, and I mean, the speech comes across in the larger backdrop of one of the big campaign, like Biden gets all this credit for keeping his campaign promises. He forgave student loan debt, and he did this, and he did that, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, one of his big promises, especially after he won, was he was going to be a uniter.
Build back better.
Look at this tweet right here. He said that, the job was not about him. It was about us, and that his job was to be the president for everybody, not just those who voted for him. And he was going to unite and all of that kind of stuff. And yet, what has he done other than ratchet up the rhetoric constantly against his political enemies, up to and including weaponizing the FBI as a basically, a domestic Gestapo to go after his political enemies. And he does all of this, and again, completely lacking in self-awareness, throwing around, or at least implying, and definitely all of the brain-dead supporters of his on Twitter love saying this: fascism is the political equivalent of racism. It literally means nothing other than people that I hate, I despise, are a fascist. Well, we've talked about fascism on this podcast before, but just to reiterate a few defining characteristics of what a fascist is. They're proponents of syndicalism, which is a cartelization of the economy, anti-capitalism, basically picking winners and losers in the economy and giving them special government favors. Rampant spending, especially on public works. So have you seen the deficit reducing in the last few years, especially under Biden? He asks rhetorically. The economy must be directed by the state is a key component of fascism. Ask yourself which side is more in line with that ideology. Profligate military spending in furtherance of an empire. How about the individual being subordinate to the will of the majority, of the state? How about nationalism? The idea that the state is the embodiment of the will of the people. Therefore, anything the state does is ex ante justified because the people support it. If you have that ideology, you're going to be running around basically calling everybody who doesn't agree with you a domestic terrorist. Why? Because you've already built up the false premise in your brain that everything you decide to do is the will of the people. So by definition, anybody who's against what you're doing is against the will of the people. So isn't it interesting, right? How these people who don't have a fucking clue, any historical knowledge whatsoever, to know what actual, true, real fascism is, as defined by Mussolini, the guy who created the entire ideology from socialism, which he was, is exactly what Biden et al. Are pushing for. Total state control,
or just a
direction of the economy by the state, subordinating the individual to the state. That's fascism. And that's exactly what Biden is saying. If you don't agree with that, you're probably a fascist.
Which again is gaslighting. Like, if you don't agree with everything I say, then you're obviously racist. If you don't agree with everything I say, you're obviously a Nazi. And if you don't agree with everything I say, you're obviously a fascist, despite the fact that I'm exhibiting a hell of a lot more fascistic emotes, I should say. But to move on, I just want to go back to his campaign slogan. It was Build Back Better. What part of any of his campaign has been better than what we've seen for the past 20 fucking years? We are...
Nothing to anybody who's paying attention.
We are plummeting in the stock market, but they won't address it because it makes them look bad. I didn't think Afghanistan could get any more fucked until I saw what happened when we pulled out. And we pulled out like a 16-year-old. Like, we definitely left some fucking trails. Anyway, our housing market is in such a flux. They're saying that our employment rate is up, but what? They're saying that people don't want to work. They're saying people don't want to work. It's like, you're right. People are fed up working after you shoved them at home for 2 years, by the way. Let's not forget, they looked at their lives and they said, listen, I can't keep working this dead-end job that barely makes it feasible for me to live. I'm tired of living in poverty and I won't work for the bare minimum anymore. But then they come back and say that people don't want to work anymore. It's like, what is this, a class system? Like, you're going to hate on a person that doesn't want to go to work at McDonald's for $8 an hour and work a 12-hour shift and still not be able to pay any of their bills to live in a fucking studio apartment? Like I would say that's the silent protest. People not wanting to work for less than their worth. And they can't work for $8 anymore and still afford anything because of inflation. Oh, which was created by the Democratic Party pushing it through, but now they're blaming Trump for printing. Like, nobody takes responsibility for anything. And again, this isn't just a democratically aimed thing. Nobody is taking responsibility for anything. When nobody takes responsibility, nobody holds them responsible for it. That's when you get this shit. That's when you get people just being able to say whatever the fuck they want, whenever the fuck they want to, and they know they're never going to be held accountable for it because tomorrow they'll just say they never said it. And then you'll show them a clip that they said it. And they'll be like, well, it was taken out of context and I really meant this, so we'll just move on. And you, to sustain your belief in whatever religious party that you're at, Republican or Democratic, you'll hold that to your truth. If you're a Republican, you'll say they're a liar and that the Republican's true. And if you're a devout member of the Democratic Party, you'll say the Democrat was right, or at least they meant to do well, because they're obviously more moral than the Republican Party. They just want to make money. So,
well, and I guess I'll finish with this, is it's very convenient for Biden to just say MAGA Republicans, MAGA Republicans, MAGA Republicans, because if anybody like...
How quick are they going to drop the MAGA, by the way?
Oh, instantaneously. We've already
talked about... Right when they get traction, they're going to drop it.
We've already talked about how when John Brennan went on MSNBC and was rattling off the list of people that the FBI was going to start targeting, he just threw in libertarians. Like, that's a very broad umbrella. But, you know...
Got to nip it in the bud.
But saying MAGA Republicans allows Biden and his... sycophants to basically say, oh, well, he's only going after them. So people that aren't MAGA Republicans, like David and I, again, people that are a little bit more naive will say, well, I'm not a MAGA Republican. They're not going to come after me. What's the big deal? Well, see, here's the thing. Although David and I aren't MAGA Republicans, and when Trump said this a couple years ago, and I'm paraphrasing, he said basically, they're coming after me only because I'm in their way. What they really want is to come after you. Now, obviously, Trump being the narcissist he is and his followers, looking up to him as the deity that they do, they're looking at him as their great leader that's standing in between him and them. And that is one way to interpret what he said. But perhaps unintentionally, or maybe he meant it this way, but perhaps unintentionally, a broader, deeper truth is embedded in him saying that. Is that when you look at a John Brennan basically lump in everything who is basically to the right of Hillary Clinton, right, as a domestic terrorist threat who the FBI needs to target, is Trump, them going after Trump because they're really after you, isn't just the people that wear the red hat, wrap themselves in the flag, and swear by everything Trump has to say. It is anybody who dares to question the regime. That's how broad the net gets. So David and I don't have to be MAGA Republicans. You don't have to be MAGA Republicans. You have to simply disagree and in worst cases, voice that disagreement publicly, as we stick our necks out by doing with this podcast. Simply disagree with the direction that Biden and the regime are pushing. And that will get you ensnared in that very, very wide casting of the net. So, yeah, they went after Trump because what they're really after is those of us who disagree with the regime. And Trump, not being a person of the inner circle, was in their way at that moment. But he's not there standing as some stalwart to protect us or anything else like that. But still, he said a very fundamental truth, and that is you cannot disagree with the direction that Biden et al. Wants to go. That alone makes you a domestic terrorist. Well, to that we say, MAGA Republicans are the least of your worry, Joe, because there's a lot more of us that fit under that net that aren't MAGA Republicans, that don't take threats kindly and don't take them lying down. And we can read between your lines. We see the optics that you choose to put behind you, and we see the ramping up of your rhetoric. Some of us will stand for far less than others. I guess keep pushing and asking for all the smoke at your own risk. Well, however that manifests, maybe it does at the polls, maybe it does in other ways. But I suggest you stop poking the bear.
I think the best way to surmise this is with this whole episode is the quote from V for Vendetta, where this whole episode started, is that people should not be afraid of their government. The government should be afraid of their people. And that's literally every politician I've ever heard on television my entire life has forgotten that very, very derivative principle, is that you're there because we put you there. I know you think that the people that you are placating, that gave you a lot of money to buy a lot of commercial time, that got you elected, you think they put you there. So you're going to suck the and that's fine. You don't mind being a whore for them. But guess what? Eventually you're found out. And in this age of information, where we don't have the only information we got for the last 20 years before, the internet really took off was CNN, Fox News. So it's really easy to control one outlet. It's really easy to control two outlets. But now that every fucking outlet has their own opinion and has more information than they could ever possibly be construed in one 24-hour news cycle, and it's all viable, there's a lot more. I'm hopeful. Are you black pill and I'm white pill?
I wouldn't say I'm black pill on this. I'm pretty white pill on it. I don't think it needs to go as far as Biden seems to want to push it.
But that's the thing. He has to have backers to push it. Who's going to push it with him? The guys that don't want guns, the guys that want to eat bean curds and tell them that women can be men and men can be women and that masculinity is fucking toxic. Well,
but don't you know, David, he has...
Wait until you meet that fucking masculinity.
He has F-15s, you have AR-15s, and he seems...
Who's going to fly this for you?
He seems to think that
who's flying
top
this for
to
you?
Bottom, left, right, up,
who's
down,
flying
and in
the
the
F-15s,
center,
Joe?
all the soldiers are going to
Who's
fall
flying
in
the
line and
F-15s,
shoot
Joe?
at American citizens.
Who do you think they voted for, Joe?
That's what he thinks.
I know he does. You can think all you want.
Which is why I say, stop poking the bear. You're not as strong as you think you are.
And again, your side wants to take the guns away from everybody. Who do you think owns all the guns? You fucking moron. Stop being a pacifist wading into war. It's much better to be a warrior.
He's not a pacifist. That's for damn sure.
Well, he plays a pacifist. Yeah. But it's much better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So remember that. When you want to start talking about taking away people's rights, there's no further... That's the wall. We're up against it. We'll play your game as long as it's just like we're placating you, we're making you feel better, that's fine. We'll be silent. We'll go our own way. It doesn't really change my day. But when you start taking away rights... We start pushing back against the people. Again, it's them calling the people that fight back terrorists. But the real terrorist is coming from above.
It always does.